How did you first become interested in your career, and can you describe your career?
Sure. So I work in private equity. I am a principal on an investment team, and I lead our efforts in beauty, personal care, and wellness. So investments that touch all of those subsectors. And I would say I actually got interested in my career probably when I was around your age. My dad, he got us a family paper subscription because at the time people actually read physical papers of the Wall Street Journal. And I just remember being really interested from an early age in business. And I didn't know anything about the industries. My parents didn't work in this field at all. So I just remember trying to be in high school and absorb what I could from the Wall Street Journal newspaper.
Mhm.
And there was an article one time about a woman who had started her own PE firm. And at the time, I didn't even know really what private equity was, but the article described how she owned 10 to 20 businesses all in different industries. And I thought that was really cool how she was able to be so high level and get to see so many different industries in just one single career, and have a leadership position in all of them. I thought that was a really exciting career path.
Yeah, that's super cool. I feel like, especially as a woman, it's really cool to hear these kind of stories. Um, and what was your first job or internship like?
First professional job or first job like in high school?
Probably professional.
Professional. Okay, so my first professional internship was at Credit Suisse. I was a sophomore in college, and it was out of the New York office, which was really, really cool because I went to UC Berkeley for school, and it was pretty atypical. It's a technically a non-target school. And so having the experience of getting to live in New York for a summer and getting to be really immersed in Wall Street, it's just there's something about being physically in the heart of the ecosystem that's really hard to replicate in other cities that might have satellite offices. So I loved like the hustle and bustle. I loved how, the industry just moves so fast, and there was so many different aspects to investment banking. And so, yeah, it was my sophomore year, and the group that I was actually in my first year was equity research, which is adjacent to investment banking, but I always knew that I wanted to go the banking route. And so the whole summer, I made it my mission since I had my foot in the door at a bank. I figured there would be a way for me to network and get my way over to the banking team. And so while I, did a good job in equity research because that was what I was there to do, I did every free moment, lunch, coffee, etc., to try to meet banking people. And it worked because for the following summer, I got an offer into a banking group.
Oh,
So it was a good experience.
yeah. What were some important choices or experiences that helped you get where you are today?
Wow, that's a good question. I would say some of the most important choices I made were around discipline and staying focused.
Hmm.
I think along my path, there's been a lot of opportunities and times when I could have changed course, and a lot of my friends and peers did. I'm one of the only people that I kind of started in the field with who's still in it. Um, and so I would say discipline with respect to like the long-term vision and goal. Private equity in general is an apprenticeship business. And so you really have to commit to the long term to the goal of like rising in this field because nobody gets to the top overnight.
Yeah.
And you really have to learn from the people above you. And the early years can be challenging because you're, really kind of building your skill set, and you have to do a lot of hard work in the early years to kind of shore up all the different skill gaps. And I would say, along the path, there was certainly times where things were challenging, and a lot of, my peers were kind of exiting the field to things that were a little bit less intense. And so staying the course, I think, has been really helpful because now like I'm at a more senior level, which there's no way that like I would have been able to get here, especially at my age, without having stayed the course.
Mhm. Yeah, I think so. These interviews are kind of marketed towards high school and college kids to kind of show them what jobs are out there and what possibilities there are. So, if you could go back to high school, what would you tell your younger self?
Oh wow. What would I tell my younger self? Um, I think when you're in high school,
Mhm.
it can be really overwhelming to think about like there's so many different options and opportunities and pathways. And so one thing in hindsight, looking back, that I think I did a good job on, which I would tell other high schoolers to do as well, is to try to do internships even in high school.
Mhm.
So when I was in high school, before I found out about kind of investing and Wall Street, I had thought that I was going to be a really passionate lawyer. I don't know why. I just thought because I liked writing and English, I thought I would go the law route. And when I was maybe a junior in high school, I did one summer working at a law firm and it was unpaid and I hated it. I absolutely hated it. I don't know. It was just really slow paced. It
Yeah.
wasn't interesting to me. The environment felt very sterile. It didn't feel fast moving. And so, had I told myself just, oh, I want to be a lawyer because I'm good at English and I didn't actually have real world experience to know, I think I could have gone down a path that wasn't right for me. And so, trying things early, even if it's unpaid, which I know is unglamorous and all that good stuff, but just to have your foot in the door and kind of careers are a little bit of a contact sport. You have to be around other people that are doing what you want to do to know whether or not it's something that actually fits with you and your personality.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. I think internships are definitely a great way to get into things. Like I'm applying to a few internships this summer. So I think I learned through experience and I know a lot of other high schoolers that do. So I think that is really good advice.
Yeah, yeah. I'm
Um,
excited to see what internships you do.
yeah. Have to wait and find out. What does a typical day or week look like for you?
I would say a typical day varies quite a bit. I wake up really early. So I'm a mom. I have a 2-year-old.
Mhm.
So I wake up usually between 5 and 5:30, and then my first stop is the gym.
Mhm.
I think in careers, it's also really important to try to stay healthy because at the end of the day, like your body is what helps you keep going, right? So that's been a really important routine for me. So I go to the gym first, and then I get ready at the gym for my work day. And
Mhm.
then when I show up at work, usually my day is a mix of Zoom calls like this, meetings in person or presentations. And then a lot of the times, honestly, it's also in-person meetings, whether it's with management teams across the country that are leading different businesses that we might invest in. Um, and then part of my day is also still analysis or like basically looking at company data and trying to come up with thoughtful insights about whether or not those are good investments. And then now that I'm more of a mid-level professional, I also am doing a decent amount of coaching and managing associates and more junior people on our team, which is, a pretty important task because that's how the apprenticeship model of our business works. You have to kind of help the next generation come up the ranks in order to be effective at their jobs and then also to, continue to have firm growth overall.
Yeah. What kinds of projects or problems do you work on the most?
So all of my projects are what we call deals. And so deals are if we're looking at buying a company. And the way that it typically works is there's an investment banker who sells companies to private equity firms or other public companies,
Hmm.
and they essentially do an auction process. So they sell the company first, the bankers put together a long presentation deck. The groups that are looking to buy it, which we would in private equity, we would go to a management meeting. And so we would fly out to the company headquarters, talk with the CEO and the management team for a couple of hours. And then following the meeting, the investment bankers open what's called a data room. And
Hmm.
it's basically just like a website that has a bunch of files in it all about the company. And so it's really the most junior person on the team's job to take the first pass at cutting everything. And then the mid-level, which is my role, kind of helps make sure that they covered all the analyses that would be helpful for an investment committee, and then put together investment committee materials to present a thesis to the broader team, which is for us, our investment committee is everyone at our firm. Um, and so then if you have approval to do the deal, the next big step is to negotiate the price with the sellers and work through all the legal docs with all the lawyers. So all of my projects have that similar flow to them, but some projects, for example, are much more advanced. We're close to signing a deal, so I'm doing way more legal work.
Yeah.
But then some projects, it's very early stage, and so it's just a first bid, and we're just looking at the initial presentation. So my day-to-day and project flow can really vary depending on the stage of the transaction.
Yeah. Think, what is your favorite part about your job?
My favorite part about my job, I would say my favorite part is I my personality type is one where I'm pretty fast paced. And so I like the environment where I feel like things are always moving and very dynamic, and no day is the same.
Mhm.
And every day, I think the thing about the law firm that I didn't love was I felt like you really just had one big project and one big problem or one big assignment that you're working on. And I think in private equity, what keeps it really interesting and dynamic is you have all throughout the day a whole bunch of different micro decisions or micro challenges that you're working through. So, with one bigger goal in mind, which is ideally closing a deal at a good price. And so, because it's fast moving and dynamic, it just constantly keeps you on your toes. And I think that's really intellectually stimulating.
Mhm. I think this is also really good for me to hear because I'm looking to get into private equity when I'm older. So this has definitely been helpful for me. Um,
Good.
what are some challenges or stressful parts of your work?
So, I mean, the other side of the coin of working in a really fast-paced environment is that obviously you kind of have to always be on your toes and ready. And like, there's when you're kind of in the heat of closing a deal, it's really hard to have like downtime to just stop and think, because there's just a lot of volume of work that has to get done in a short period of time. So I would say like that can get stressful at times when, you're sprinting towards a deal, and even though it's something that you're excited about, but there's just a lot of work to get through, it's hard for that to not be stressful in moments. And then I would say, as someone who's a woman in private equity, and there's not many women in this field in general, um, I would say it's not stressful that I'm the only woman, but I would say it can be just a little bit more daunting at times when, especially when I was junior and kind of coming up the ranks, to know how to share my opinion, how to really have a strong voice in the room. I think that's been a bit of a learning process for me, and is something I've gotten certainly better at over time, but has been in moments like a source of stress when you're the only of anything, whether it's woman, ethnicity, it can be challenging.
Yeah, I think that's super admirable to me because I feel like I faced that a little bit too as I've gotten older and gotten into the business clubs or the investment clubs. So it's nice to hear that you can really get something out of that and still do well in your profession, even facing that kind of gender gap.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think I think there's certainly more opportunity for women, and I think there's space for women to be super successful and all ethnicities to be very successful. And I think it takes a lot of self-assurance
Mhm.
to do that. And so I think working on yourself as a whole person in your career, and it's like I said, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Mhm.
So I think that's something that young people can kind of focus on as well, as far as like how to really become self-assured, confident, high self-esteem people, because that's how you kind of break through.
Yeah. What skills do you use most for your job?
The skills I use most for my job, I would say the core of private equity is always going to be analytics,
Mhm.
right? Because you constantly are analyzing numbers, companies, spreadsheets, etc. I would say as you become more senior, a skill set that's very important is selling. And I don't mean selling like driving revenue per se, but more so selling ideas, kind of persuading people to think the way that you're thinking, articulating your investment case. So the skill set as you become more senior becomes very different because at that point you're raising capital,
Yeah.
you're selling yourself to management teams, why you're the best partner, you're negotiating purchase price. Um, and that's another thing that I really like about the job. It's kind of like a 3D puzzle where you're always trying to think like four steps ahead of everybody and kind of game plan on how to like win a deal. That can be really fun too. So I would say those are kind of how the skills evolve over time. It starts very focused on analytics and then it becomes more of a transition to how to be like a real deal maker as you get more senior in the role.
Mhm. Yeah, I think one big thing that I've been looking into as I've explored all these different career paths is how AI might affect everything, especially as it's become such a big kind of impact in our daily lives. So how do you think AI might impact your career path?
I hope that AI really helps us to double down on like essentially become more optimized
Yeah.
such that we're able to continue to do our work, but do it at a much faster pace and be able to make more informed and educated decisions. I think it's going to create less information asymmetry because people are going to like all be able to come to a similar answer by using the same AI tools. So I think it's going to be a little bit more challenging to get alpha, if you will, if everyone's kind of looking at the same AI outputs.
Mhm.
That being said, like I do think that AI, in my view, should really just be extrapolating like the good parts that someone already has. So, for example, like if we can churn through data rooms at 10x the speed, we
Mhm.
can then use our more human skill sets to actually win deals. Because at the end of the day, like deal making is a contact sport and it's a very human interaction. And AI is never going to be able to replace selling a business and how a business owner sells their legacy, which is their most important asset. No one's going to sell that to an AI,
Yeah.
computer. And so I think the soft skills are going to become increasingly more important over time.
Mhm. Have you noticed any AI influence in the past few years?
Yes, so we have a very strong focus at our firm on AI, and we really try to institute AI across all of our portfolio companies.
Mhm.
And so we have AI experts that look at our businesses and try to find ways that we can leverage the technology, whether it's through, customer service, financial modeling, being more quick to respond to vendors and suppliers, etc. So we have a wide array of ways that we use it across our portfolio. And now I'm starting to see more tools that are helping private equity professionals analyze data rooms in a much faster way, which is great.
Mhm.
And then I personally use AI all the time for like writing, summarizing my notes, things like that to just make me a lot more efficient.
Mhm. Think shifting gears a little bit, what do you think, what kind of people tend to enjoy this field or do well in it?
I think people in this field who do well have a good mix of the ability to be personable and the ability to really sell a deal or sell, the vision of a deal, but also have a really high mix of strong intellect around the analytics because you really need both. You need right brain and left brain in this field. And I think people in this field, because it's not a kind of 9 to 5 more typical lifestyle of like many careers, I think you have to be pretty ambitious and frankly, in some respects, competitive too, because it is a very competitive business. It just is. And so I think you kind of need a mix of people who have the intellect and the pattern recognition
Mhm.
and can think through the math of a deal,
Yeah.
but also have the ability to have the soft skills to know how to lead a team, how to, find executives to partner with, how to find investors for your deals. Like you need all of those pieces to come together.
Mhm. And then what kind of education or training do you think you need for this career? And are there any certain like classes or clubs or maybe activities that you'd recommend for high school or college students to do if they're interested in this field?
Yeah, so when I was in college, honestly, I didn't do like an investment club or anything like that.
Mhm.
I was a self-funded college student, so I worked 2 to 3 jobs all throughout school.
Oh.
So I found that honestly, real world work experience in my mind, even if it's a job that's not, a professional career job, I actually think like I've worked retail in multiple instances. I've worked like work study jobs. I worked at the Haas Business School, just almost doing like a organizational job for, the campus administration. I worked at the law school as well, doing a similar type of role in a work study position.
Mhm.
And so I just think getting actual work experience, even if it's not a high caliber career job, it teaches you the basics, which are super important to keep a job, right? It's
Yeah.
like show up on time, go the extra mile. Retail, especially when you're dealing with the random people that come in and out of a shop, like I think those types of interactions and that work ethic
Mhm.
has served me really well because in any career where you're working really hard, like there's going to be days when, you don't necessarily feel super excited to run out the door, but you know you have to because you have real responsibilities. And
Mhm.
I think it comes down to like learning how to manage big responsibilities. Kind of starts with managing small ones first.
Yeah.
So I would say try to get real world work experience.
Yeah. I think that's definitely a good piece of advice because I feel like it's kind of daunting to think of all these internships or maybe small business things to do, especially as a high school or college student. So it's nice to know that there are other kind of steps or ways to do things to just build up your tolerance or kind of like personality for the job.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like, so when I interviewed for Credit Suisse, I interviewed for a research job, and the research job was actually in the consumer sector.
Yeah.
And the partner who interviewed me found it really interesting that I had retail experience because I actually had worked at a clothing shop before. So I had real world experience. And I think that it can be really easy to think that you need to have all these, really high caliber accolades. And while those are great, like it's good to have a mix of them. I
Mhm.
think it gives you a more down to earth experience as well if you've actually done a job that's less, glamorous because it teaches you grit and hard work that is what you really need to get through this kind of industry.
Yeah. And then what's something that most people don't know or might misunderstand about your job?
Um, honestly, I don't know that a lot of people aside yourself, because you are very ahead of your age. I don't know that many high schoolers know that much about private equity, to be honest. I think it's an industry that doesn't have a lot of education around it just because it's lesser known. I think that now that there's like more in the press about private equity owning a lot of big businesses. I think now people are starting to learn a little bit more about it.
Mhm.
Um, but I think that sometimes people can assume because of those press articles that private equity is bad because we're buying companies and
Mhm.
changing the cost structure in theory.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of examples of where private equity has grown businesses. So I think that's maybe one perhaps misunderstanding or something that, high schoolers might want to learn more about is just the, value creation that private equity has driven.
Yeah. And then how do you think private equity is changing or evolving?
I think with AI specifically, private equity is changing a lot because now the career path is just different because I think in the next 5 to 10 years, the banks aren't going to need as many investment banking analysts. So I think it's going to be a much smaller pool of talent coming in. And so I think it's changing because it's becoming more streamlined, which is from an efficiency standpoint really good, but from a career perspective, probably more challenging for young people coming in. Um, but I think in general, like investing is always going to be there because people are always going to want to find ways to grow capital.
Yeah. And then what is the work-life balance like in your career?
Um, I would say that there is daily trade-offs is how I would describe it.
Uh-huh.
So like I said, I'm a mom, and obviously have, a really um busy career. And I would say I don't have a 50-50 balance, and I don't think anybody in this career does.
Yeah.
I think it's like some days I know, okay, I am going to be an amazing businesswoman and I'm going to really lean into that. And that's where I'm going to be present and I'm going to be really focused.
Mhm.
And then on other days when I'm in mom mode, I know, like, okay, today I'm going to be really focused on being a mom and I'm going to be the best mom or best wife, etc. Um, and so I don't think about my life in the sense of like 50-50 work-life balance. I think about being where my feet are and being the best version of myself in whatever setting I'm in at that time. But there's going to be daily trade-offs if you're working in a career like this for sure.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good piece of advice because I feel like, yeah, it's hard to balance things. So it's nice to know, living in the present and just having that daily kind of restructuring is a good idea.
Yeah.
Well, I think you talked about growing businesses. I feel like that must feel really good. What do you find most meaningful about what you do?
The most meaningful part about my job, honestly, is getting to partner with amazing CEOs and executives that lead our businesses.
Yeah.
And in our field, or at our firm specifically, each private equity firm operates a different way. We do not take over a company and then like lead it ourselves. We depend on executives to lead the business on a day-to-day basis.
Mhm.
We are thought partners with them and we talk with them on a regular cadence. But getting to build strong rapport with a really solid CEO and see them execute change and strategy that you've had an influence on in the boardroom is a really fulfilling experience
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, the CEO, of course, they are driving the day-to-day execution, but they're coming to you saying, "Hey, do you want to do A route or B route?
Mhm.
Should we pursue this product or should we pursue like this product category?" And so they come to you with like very high level strategic thoughts.
Mhm.
And so it's really cool to be able to give your opinion, see them execute against that, and then see it go well. You're like, oh wow, that's like really amazing. Like we made the right bet.
Mhm.
Um, and I've had a few runs now with companies that we've grown really successfully over, a 4 or 5 year time horizon. And it's a very fulfilling experience when you have all of the right things connecting. You have the good CEO, the good product market fit, the good underlying like company financial trends, and they all come together. It's a really amazing thing to see.
Yeah. And then what's one piece of advice that you'd give to someone just starting to think about this career?
I think I would tell somebody who's just starting to think about this career to think really long and hard about what their kind of long-term vision and goal is for their life. I think, some people might get into this field and not fully understand what the priorities kind of have to be in order to make it work and like really thrive in the role.
Mhm.
And so I would just tell people to like think through what they have for like the vision of their life. Like, is it, um, you know, what type of family situation do they want? What type of like long-term lifestyle do they want? And
Mhm.
what are they willing to kind of trade off to get there?
Yeah.
And I would have those kind of honest conversations with yourself and also regular check-ins because you're entitled to change your mind as you get older as well.
Mhm. I think adding on to that question a little bit, what do you wish that you'd learned earlier about work or career decisions?
Ooh, these are good questions, Kaya. I wish I would have known. Hmm. I think I, I don't I think what I would say is I wish I would have known how to really advocate for myself earlier on. I had no idea how to do that. I was very like I think because I was the first generation in my family to enter like a real white collar type of job and field,
Mhm.
I think I was very intimidated to advocate for myself because I felt like I should just be grateful to be there, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. So I never really like pushed for things that, I really wanted early in my career because I always just felt like, oh, I should just be grateful that I have this job and like, just kind of keep to myself. And in some respects, it's probably fair when you're the most junior person, but as I've kind of like become a little bit more senior, I've really had to hit my stride and as far as like not just advocating for myself, but also advocating for my ideas
Mhm.
and advocating for the things that I want to push for and get done at the firm. Um, and I think it's a learning process. So I don't know that there's like one thing I could have told myself to know how to do it day one, but I would say just whatever I could have done to kind of build up my self-confidence and know like my worth earlier on in my career, I think would have been really valuable.
Yeah, I really resonate with that because I think in school, especially starting a new school this year, and also in sports and in clubs, I've also had difficulty like advocating for myself, whether it was with teachers or coaches, even some friends and family. So I think that's definitely a good thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, yeah. And I think at the end of the day, just knowing your value, right? Because like you are there because they value your skill set in one way or another. And so, at the end of the day, it's like any workplace, it's a mutual relationship. And so kind of remembering that fact is really important.
Yeah. Then if someone wanted to explore your field, what would be a good first step?
I would say a good first step would be to first, I would say, look at the lives of the people who have been successful in this field. There's so many books about private equity. There's like Barbarians at the Gate. There's a handful of like very historical private equity books that I would read. And then I would try to have conversations with people and try to ask them these types of questions and see if it aligns with your values and what you want to do, and then maybe even try to get an internship somewhere. It would be probably pretty tough to get a high school internship in private equity, but I think you could probably get one at like a smaller investment bank or something to just kind of be around um, the different advisors and people that kind of touch the ecosystem.
Yeah, I think adding on to that a little bit, are there websites, podcasts, or videos or other books that you'd recommend for learning more? Like I read
Ooh.
Monkey Business over the summer, which is kind
Oh,
of
you
more
did?
investment banking, but yeah, it was a really good book.
Yeah, I would definitely read Barbarians at the Gate.
Um,
Um, Ray Dalio has a book as well that was interesting. That's more hedge fundy though. Um, let's see, what podcast do I listen to? I would say honestly, I think one thing that's really helpful for young people is aside from like core private equity content, which I'm sure you could like, look up online, I would say following the news is actually very important and an underrated skill. So there's a lot that happens in the economy and in like the macro world that influences what happens in our day-to-day business. So for example, earlier this year, when the president did all of the tariffs and Liberation Day, it was a huge impact on our business. And so I would say following the news and kind of keeping up with the headlines, reading the Wall Street Journal, and getting into that regular rhythm, it really builds your knowledge over time because you start to have more historical context as you kind of regularly read those things, as opposed to just like looking up an event when you kind of need to know about it. And so I would say building up that muscle of paying attention to what's happening in the world is really important for our industry.
Yeah. And then are there other people or roles that students should learn about to better understand this field?
Um, I think if you're really serious about doing investing, I would probably take the time to learn about the different types of investing. So there's venture capital, which is much earlier stage investing. There is private equity, which is like mid to late stage. And then there's also hedge fund investing too, where you're trading stocks or trading liquid debt. So I would try to like learn about all the different types of investing because there's a whole spectrum of different securities that people invest in. And having a good understanding for all of them will help you determine which one is the best fit for you and your interests.
Yeah. I think as we come to a close, I have one final question. What's the best way for a student to gain experience or exposure to your kind of work? Think primarily in high school or college.
I would say the best exposure is probably doing internships, I would say. But like I said, it's probably a little tricky to get a private equity internship, but there are groups out there called search funds, which are basically very small private equity firms.
Yeah.
And they actually do allow typically more younger, I would say, internships because they're a little bit smaller and they like the support. So maybe looking into search fund internships or like investment banking, like more boutique style, trying to get your foot in the door in any part of our industry, I think was really helpful to kind of get exposure, learn more, and see if it's a good fit.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for meeting with me. I really appreciate it. Um,
No worries. I hope that this was helpful.
it was. It was definitely really nice to hear about this today. I think this particular interview is helpful for me since it's the career I want to go into, and I'd also like to kind of introduce more high school and college kids to it.
That's great. Well, thank you, Kaya, for taking the time, and I'll see you next time.